Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Management Committee meeting. We'll just introduce the committee members here first, and then our guests can introduce themselves as we go, if that's all right. So I'm Judy.
Cathal Burke, member of the Management Committee and also lead member for Children and Young People.
Rob Walker, member of the Management Committee and lead for Economy and Neighbourhoods.
Gulta Massif, lead member for member of this committee and lead member for corporate.
Fanny Bunker, governance support to the committee.
And we are expecting to be joined by Councillor Elizabeth Maid. She's on our way from North Kirklees. So we have a very busy agenda today, so we don't have a lot of time. So I'm hoping that everyone's read all the papers, so we don't have to spend a lot of time presenting the reports, so we can go straight into the detail and questions. So just as a forewarning. So we start first of all with minutes of the previous meeting. Is everyone happy to approve the minutes? Yeah? Okay. Interest. Do the councillors on the panel have any interest to declare? No? That's good. This agenda is all in public, so it's nice for the public to join us. We like to see them and like them to get involved. And then we move on to item 4, which is inclusion and diversity. So this is where we go over to David, but as I said, we don't want to go into too much detail about the content because everyone's read it. So if you could just highlight if there's anything else that we need to know about, that would be really good. And then I'll open it up to questions, if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. David Bundy, Corporate Policy Officer, just for introductions. So the report is here to update the committee on progress over the last 18 months, which is encapsulated in the annual report that's been circulated, and also to project forward to the objectives and outcomes for the coming year. So, a little bit of context, we are obliged as a public sector organisation to report on what we've done in the previous 12 to 18 months, hence the annual report, and we are then obliged to set objectives under our public sector reported duty. So a brief introduction to those two documents. The annual report goes through the activities and the areas for improvement under the themes of our inclusion and diversity policy statements, which is published on the website, which we did discuss at this committee about 18 months ago and had very useful input in developing that document, if you remember. So that, I think, this time round, the annual report is a more candid assessment of where we are. So it's about, as I say, what we've achieved under those 7 headings, the impact it's made over the last 12 to 18 months, and also, like I say, areas for improvement that we will take forward either as part of this year's action plan or supporting programmes of work in services across the council. The Year 2 action plan, as we promised last time, is going to be more outward-facing. Because Year 1 was essentially about getting our own house in order, in effect. A lot of activity about data collection that was outstanding, processes that we need to get in place around guidance for managers, etc. So this year round, we are actually looking at, like I say, more impactful community outward-facing activities. So just very briefly, on the second page of your cover report, just to highlight a few areas that are going into more detail in the action plan. We picked out the areas that we are particularly going to focus on in the 12 months to give them an extra priority. So, for example, we know that people in learning difficulties do struggle to find work in general, but also particularly with the council. So we've embarked on what I call supported internship programme, and we are getting that a bigger push this year round and using a process called job carving, where we look at parts of the job that person can do and parts that they can't do, and they'll get a coach to help them along the way. The second point is a big push, which comes politically here as well, and rightfully so, that we still lack representation, particularly at the upper end of the organisation, particularly around BME, disabled people, and to a certain degree, young employees. So there'll be a push to look at more creative ways of adjusting that moving forwards. And then finally, a push on diversity training across the organisation, and then a final point on that will be a greater emphasis on our support to migration and new migrants. So that's something where we are. Okay,
that's great. It's a great introduction. Thank you. Is there anything you want to add? I don't know. I guess that's fine. Okay, guys. We'll open up to questions now. I have a number of questions, but if there's anything you want to start, anybody? Rob? Okay.
Yeah. Okay. My first question is from the bullet points on page 2 of the protocol. I really welcome the fact that there's going to be more work on supported internships for students with learning disabilities. I know that it mentions Kirklees College and real employment. Is there any plan to work with other institutions in the town? So I'm thinking of the other colleges, particularly Huddersfield New College, that does tend to have quite a number of students with both physical and learning disabilities, but also the schools really to begin work with youngsters before they reach the age of 16.
Okay, so Councillor Walker, very, very good point. The initial programme that we've got is principally based with those two organisations, yeah, and that will be the initial push this year to work with them. But speaking to the lead officer for that particular area, the plans are to roll it out to some of the other institutions that you mentioned, where we know there are people in learning difficulties that are struggling to gain permanent employment. So I think it's a staged approach to see where we get to with those main two players, first of all, if you like, and then to actually see how it works and roll it out. Because I think the issue has been that we've offered people actual internships, but then it's not led on to actually a secured job. And that's what we want to really try and pilot this year in a much more robust way. But certainly there will be an expansion to other institutions throughout there.
Yeah, I think this idea of job carving, I'd not come across it before, but I think it sounds really interesting. And I think building up a longer-term relationship with the young people is really important, rather than it just being something that happens at a career fair or something like that. I think it's building up those links over a period of time so that as Kirklees, we know more about the young people, but the young people know more about us and get greater encouragement. So I think this seems very positive.
I'll just add to that, because it's one of the things I wanted to raise as well, because I like the idea of it. It looks really good, but it does also give me some concerns about whether it has a budget impact. Can we really afford it as well? So if you could just address that as well.
Well, we have factored in the cost of actually increasing the offer to that cohort of people. Yeah, we're in the budget process, but that will be played into the budget discussions this year moving forward. So obviously we won't jeopardise the budget process, but equally we will look to resource it appropriately to make it sustainable.
I think it's a great idea, and I'm sure there'll be more benefits than costs, but it needs to be clarified so it doesn't raise any alarms anywhere. Good. Any other points before Golfam?
Thank you, Chair. David, fantastic report. I just want to say, fantastic insight into page 23. Gives you the breakdown of, people, and kind of everything around in Kirklees, and the breakdown of ethnic groups and all the rest. It's just fantastic. What I wanted to highlight, and I think I've mentioned this before, is on page 10, you've got introduce comprehensive diversity training employers and counsellors. This is something that I've looked into, and one of the things I realised is that this is some of the training that we've given, which is out there, is each department manager is responsible for. And what I'd like to see is something which is as a collective. So whatever department you're involved in or work for, it needs to be centralised. So actually, somebody like yourself and others who specialise in that particular field can answer some of the questions. So, for example, if manager is managing something on highways, the training, the people that they're working for when they're out there, it needs to be crucial. They need to be equipped. So, therefore, having the right questions, yourself, Carl, Gil, Chris, others who've that's their expertise, centralise it, have that introduction, and including the counsellors. I mean, some of the issues that we've seen, on social media, it's all about the kind of growing, progressing times that we're in at the moment, so we need to be careful and need to have certain benchmarks and standards.
Thank you, Councillor Gover. Absolutely. I think what we realised is that maybe over the past few years we haven't set that benchmark. Therefore, people across the whole organisation that aren't clear about their expectations around this agenda. Therefore, the idea is to increase the diversity training in the manner that you've almost described. Really, it should play into good management in a way. It should be part of your toolkit as a manager, but we know that is quite patchy at times across the organisation. So I think the initial part of this programme will be to set that baseline, outlining what's expected of managers and employees as well, because I think it's about not just managing the situation, it's about adhering to our organisational behaviours and expectations where inclusion and diversity is implicit within those behaviours, but probably not pulled out explicitly enough. So I think hopefully to answer just your point, the initial point will be, let's create that benchmark right across the organisation so the standard is set. And as you say, let's equip our managers to be able to deal with situations should they arise, as best they can.
Yeah, just to follow on that, I mean, the overall content and everything, how we're moving forward is great. I think it's maybe we can have a further update on the training, and it's going to evolve as we go along, and we can have an input, not just this management committee, but overall the councillors, how we see and how we perceive things. So yeah, an update on that training alone itself. I mean, the content and everything on this one, perfect.
I'm quite happy for get regular feedback on this and how it's progressing, including training. That'd be good. I asked for a similar question around benchmarking, though. On page 16 of our report, it talks about being a full member of inclusive employers and becoming a disability confident employer as well. And I just wondered if there was any benchmarking provided, so we know when you come back with these reports, we can see what progress, if there are any practical measures in place.
Actually, Chair, it's a very pertinent question, is that I had a meeting with the regional rep from Inclusive Employers last week, and the benefit of our membership of that organisation is that they offer external support and challenge around this. and they've just actually announced a new inclusive standard, which is being rolled out nationally. So I think that's something that we've now expressed an interest in to get more information on. Only last week, like hot off the press, this is on Thursday. On Thursday, I think that partly addresses the point you're making, because that has disability confidence within that framework. Yeah. So I think it's all very well us internally assessing progress, but I think sometimes we need that external evaluation and assessment of how well we're doing. And I haven't got information yet, but from the conversation with the regional rep, it looks very comprehensive. It looks like it covers all the areas that we are aspiring to tackle, and I think it offers a gold, silver and bronze standard that we can aspire to, and we can actually work towards 3 layers of criteria over a period of time. So I can report back to this committee, should we adopt that, and how we're going to work that into our evaluation process.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a very thorough and in-depth report, particularly like the diversity and inequalities in Kirklees section, along with deprivation and inequalities, the attention to detail. On page 14 of my papers, we're looking at a committed and diverse workforce. The bullet point where we've retained a number of services in-house which employ a high proportion of female workers in comparison to other local authorities. How sustainable is that long term, do you think, going forward, that we can continue to do that, and if indeed we will? And then just briefly on areas for improvement on zero tolerance and reporting of incidences, in particular hate crime, just how we're looking at how we're going to deal with that and increasing awareness among managers as well.
Yeah, so can you just repeat your first question? Sorry.
Yeah, the number of services that we've retained in-house in relation to the number of female employees, how sustainable that is long term to be able to do that.
Okay. So I think that was a decision to retain services like catering and cleaning in-house that have a higher proportion of female employees. So in terms of our gender pay gap, that obviously has a certain impact compared to other authorities. How sustainable that is, I must be quite bluntly, I don't know. I don't know what pressures there are on budgetary-wise on whether we actually will keep that in-house or whether we will find another delivery model to take that forward. So, sorry if I can't exactly address your point there, but I think that's going to be a political decision moving forward. But having said that, if we do retain in-house those services, there will be a move to rectify the inequality in pay scales that do exist in the coming years. So that will be part of that process. Yeah. And sorry, the second point was?
Just in relation to reporting of incidents.
Yes.
In particular hate crime, and how that's going to be managed through senior managers.
Yeah, sorry, yes. So we have enhanced the guidance this year that goes out to managers and employees. Yeah. So last year, in terms of, for example, hate crime, we only had in a council 3 incidents reported, which I find a little bit, well, I'm quite surprised at, to be honest. I think part of that was managers and employees not knowing where to actually go to report of hate crimes, because hate crimes, as you know, has been an external reporting mechanism for the police, primarily. Yeah, we now brought that in as part of the package that goes for managers and to employees. That is available to all on our internet. That's been communicated out. So there has been a slight increase, which you would expect, if you're raising awareness about how you can report, you would expect a slight increase in the last few months. There has been a few more incidents that have come in, and I would expect that sort of spike to continue for a while, and we need to monitor that. We now produce a data pack that goes to all senior managers around a whole host of HR issues, and that information will be included in that data pack so we can keep a close check on how that is monitored across the organisation and in different services as well.
I've got a long list of questions for you here, but we'll just let Gulfam and then Rob go first. And then...
Thanks, Chair. On page 23, the breakdown of data, diversity and equalities in Kirklees. When you look at the religion, we know for a fact that we've got Sikh and Hindu. Could we have that included in there? Because at the moment there's only kind of Christian, Muslims and non-religion. So it'd be nice to kind of, just like the other, to get percentage of, you know, exactly what the different breakdowns are. Thank you.
Then, if we include in all of that, do we include Quakers? Do we include the others? I know there's a number of various religions across Kirklees, and do we want to include all of them? Do we include just priority ones, the big ones, or do we include them all? I don't think we can just pick out a few. Do you want to comment on that?
Kate McNicholas, I'm Strategy and Policy Service Manager. What we can do is just look at the next two groups down in terms of size and see what those are and list those. So absolutely your point that we wouldn't go, for the purposes of this sort of summary document, we wouldn't include everything, that would lose value. But we can certainly look at the bigger groups underneath the 24% Muslim.
Right, Rob.
Yeah. To what extent are we working with our partners who are involved in the delivery of public service? So I'm thinking of people like K&H and CAL, Locala, organisations like that. So to what extent do we work with them so that we've got a joint approach with this?
So the partnership approach is an emerging one, Councillor Walker. I think we've obviously tried to, going back to my comment about getting our own house in order last year, that was the primary focus on the council itself. This year we are expanding out to, there's a point in the Year 2 action plan where we are working with the VCS on making volunteering more inclusive. We are looking at for example, a diversity awards conference next year, and that will be wholly partnership based. And I had a meeting and conversations last week, for example, with Kirklees College, the police, the university, etc. So more and more we are building that partnership approach into the delivery of how we are taking this agenda forward. What I'd like to see over time is my aspiration. We do have an inclusion and diversity hub that manages this whole program of work. At the moment we have, the only partner on there is K&H. I'd like to expand that out. We'll see that expanding out. Yeah. It's quite a large group at the moment as it is, but I'd like to bring on board people like the colleges and the university, etc., to be part of that. So they have a handle and they can bring in their expertise, and we can actually collaborate far closer on this agenda moving forward.
It bothering me about the employee networks. It's great to see what the Young Employees Network and the Me Employee Network has done. It's such a positive contribution, and obviously that's having benefits for the council as a whole. It would be so nice to support the other groups to do that. And I wondered if a recommendation from the management committee would help to push that forward and help people, the managers, to take that on board. If that would you find that helpful?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We do have action in the year-2 plan to rejuvenate all the networks, because you're absolutely right, the Young Employee Network and probably the BME network are really working quite effectively now. So, for example, we know about Young Employee Network and the tremendous activity they've undertaken, which is reflected in the annual report. Equally, the BME network are now working almost at a similar level. They organised a great deal of activity recently in Black History Month, yeah, all by themselves, yeah, with some support from us, but literally it was self-organised. They have a talent pool of people they want to bring through the organisation. But to address your point, I think the other networks, including LGBT, Disabled Employees Network, and Working Carers, yeah, we need to actually put in extra resource and support to bring them up to a comparable level. So, yes, any recommendation from here will probably help that.
Yeah, I think we will draft something and I'll share it with the members. So are the rest of the members happy if I draft out a recommendation to push that forward? That's good. The other thing is mental health. I know we've talked about that before, about how we support the council of staff with mental health issues. An employee network probably didn't work for them, but we're going to talk around some different ways of supporting them. And I wonder if any progress has been made on that, because I didn't see it in the action plan.
So we don't have an explicit network for mental health, you're right. What we do have is a wellbeing network, yeah, which is growing and becoming quite vibrant. Again, they have recently put on a number of activities, one being Mental Health Awareness Week, which was supported well across the organisation, without doubt. I think even though there isn't a specific action in the year-2 plan around mental health, what I checked was, going back to my comment about inclusive employers, yeah, part of their criteria for their assessment is how well we actually embed that in our processes going forward. So I would see that as part and parcel of the ongoing work, how we support that wellbeing network, and we raise the awareness among managers how they support people with mental health experience in the workplace moving forward.
Sorry, on the action plan, it was interesting looking about the migration and refugee resettlement plan. And I wonder, we've got some great voluntary organisations working with refugees and asylum seekers. I just wondered if there might be some that would be willing to share their stories to help other people understand what amazing challenges that they face.
Yeah, I'm working very closely with the lead officer, Sarah Mitchell, who you probably know on this agenda. And certainly we know across the board on this agenda, storytelling is a very powerful way of getting the message across. So I think part of her delivery plan, which we are going to support for this action plan, is to for members to make those positive stories come to life, and so that they resonate across the district. And part of that is probably debunking some of the myths around refugees and asylum seekers. So I think that there will be, again, thinking back to her delivery plan, a bit of a push on the comm side about how those stories are brought to life and communicated not only in the council but externally to our citizens as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask, very much linked to the point that you've just made, organisations such as Dash in Huddersfield are already doing some of this work on a voluntary basis. So do you see the council working more closely with them to perhaps extend this?
Absolutely. There's no way, Councillor Walker, we can do this alone. And where good practice exists in whatever sector, I think we need to hook into that and work collaboratively. So, yes, Dash are doing some excellent work, and we need to support what they're doing and feed into that. And there's many other organisations doing similar work, which we will be tapping into and bringing into the fold. Thank you.
Sorry, not to repeat, but I was just on the work of Dash, which I was able to see the excellent work that they do in an event last year at the stadium, and it was about how we can support them to carry on and continue to do as much as possible. But I think also members' awareness around migration, refugees in our own communities, and about where we can assist and help with that as well.
Apologies for being a bit late. I wanted to ask a question on page 27 about, on your action plan, about the supported internships for students with learning disabilities. It says to begin January 2019. So I want to ask, is that you're actually going to begin working on that strand, or the supported internships are going to start in January 2019? Is that work stream ready to go? And underneath you've got personal and career development for identified underrepresented groups as a TBC, and I wondered why that was.
So on these poverty internships, the work is currently being scoped out about how we're precisely going to do that and what numbers that we're going to offer up. Yeah. So that the date January 2019 is hopefully an aspiration when that will begin. Yeah, so I'll answer your question. That's when the recruitment process will be enhanced from where it is now. Yeah, so I fully expect that to kick off by that date. Yeah. Your second point about the internal specific programs, yeah, TBC. There's a discussion to be had still around how we actually work up a program of offers to underrepresented groups in the council, and to see what that looks like. So, for example, are we going to offer some kind of fast track management program for underrepresented groups? Those discussions are ongoing with learning and development colleagues, yeah, and Deborah Lucas, who heads up our people services. So, unfortunately, I couldn't put a specific date down as it stands because those programs haven't been pinned down in detail at the moment. So that's why it's a little bit loose and up in the air. Apologies for that.
Well, that seems to be needing to be brought forward in the plan, but also the employee networks. They've got November 2019 down, but they were in the previous years. This was last time we came. We talked about employee networks, and so I'm just wondering why that's seems to be not in a better place than it is on this action plan.
So it goes back to, you might just miss the end part of the comment earlier. I find Councillor say is that we have made great strides with the Young Employees Network and BME. I mentioned previously that the BME now are working almost autonomously around arranging events such as Black History Month. They are developing a talent pool of people in their network that are looking to progress. Yeah, we have to hold our hands up and say, as yet, the remaining networks aren't working at the same level. So we fully recognise that extra support and resource needs to go into those networks to bring them up to a comparable level. So it is an issue about capacity and time, and I think we're now taking quite a strong message to the organisation to say what the networks do is not an additional work to what the council needs. It's part and parcel of our core business. And I think once we get that message across quite strongly, and we are able to support those networks and their infrastructure better, I think they will then be able to flourish. And hopefully this time next year, I'll be able to sit here and say to you that they are now functioning at the level required.
So are we all right? We'll add this to the work programme for next year. So we can have a regular update on this and see the action plan. But in the meantime, we'll be drafting a recommendation from the Management Committee about strengthening the employee networks to be able to push them forward more. Is that okay with everyone? Thank you very much, David, for that. That has been really helpful. Yeah. I hope you found it useful for me. Good. Right, so we go over to Saf Bhutat, nice of you to join us. We're saying at the beginning we have a lot on our agenda today, so we don't need to go into a lot of detail about the reports because everyone's read the reports. But if you want to highlight anything that you think that's missing that we need to be very aware of, then that's fine, and then we'll go into questions if that's okay. Please introduce yourself for the webcast as well.
Thank you, Chair. So, for the benefit of the committee, I'm Saf Bhutat. I'm the Head of Quality and Safeguarding in Adult Social Care, taking the lead on domestic abuse across Kirklees and the partnership. And my thanks to the committee for calling in this item for further discussion today. Alexia Gray, who's the service manager, sends her apologies. She had a clashing health appointment, so I'll be covering the item. Councillor Turner, I just want to go through very briefly the content of the report, if that's okay. Very quickly. Absolutely, very quickly. Very quickly. So when I attended last time, I had the opportunity to update members on the work of the Council and partners in addressing the impact of domestic abuse. The discussions that took place, the questions and answers were very helpful, and that's beginning to shape where we're going forward with the plan. Much of this is reflected in Section 5 of the paper that you have in front of you. This includes the timeline of the new strategy, and that being 3 years. Also includes a more succinct vision, which acts as our shared and stretch ambition, and this aligns with the Council's values, and I'd welcome the committee's thoughts on this also. A focused approach and a core set of meaningful and impactful outcomes, which is under 5.3, with a renewed action plan acting as the delivery mechanism for the strategy. And finally, being able to measure and demonstrate effectiveness through the proactive use of data and intelligence. We touched on this last time as well. The section on 5.5 just reports or provides an overview of the emerging priority areas for the new strategy and vision, and we're anticipating the launch for the strategy around April 2019. I'd very much value your thoughts today on how we can further develop a shared understanding and support for this agenda, and to help to shape Kirklees as a place where people experience healthy, happy, safe lives. So I'd welcome your thoughts on this.
Thank you. Just before I open up to questions, we had the updated strategy circulated separately, so it's not included in the papers. So anybody listening on the webcast might struggle to follow that, but we'll try our best to help people out. But we can probably publish this when it's gone live. It's going live, so it's to be adopted in March, isn't it? March 2019. Yeah. So you've all had a chance to look at this.
Chair, that is the action plan, the updated action plan, rather than the strategy itself.
Yeah, the action plan was supposed to be circulated to everybody. Yeah. No. You'll look a bit great. That's fine. I get to hog the limelight and ask all the questions about it. But in the meantime, then, I'll open it up to questions on the strategy that's in the paper. Is there any questions? Liz.
At 5.3, you give the priorities that are aligned with the national priorities. And then at 5.5, you give what you're likely to prioritise in your strategy. And I wondered how those priorities in 5.3 are going to be part of your strategy content. How are you going to actually do that? Because you've got some things in your strategy content that I seem to remember were in the previous strategy content as well. So how are you going to ensure that those priorities in 5.3 come through in your strategy? It's not clear.
Thank you, Councillor Smade. So the action plan that should have gone out, and I hope did go out, would have helped with this part of the discussion. The question here is about how we create that link between the higher level national priorities which are referenced under 5.3 to ensure that there's local delivery of those. What we found when we've reviewed the previous action plan and strategy is that there's a lot to do. And we know that, given that it's a massive issue in Kirklees as it is nationally. What we've also found is that resources are stretched. We know that. We talked about the focus on early intervention last time and the need to kind of shift our focus increasingly towards early intervention and more preventative approaches. What I would say is that in terms of translating the national priorities into the local ones, for me it will be about ensuring our action plan is cogent, it's coherent, and it's actually demonstrable in terms of the so what question. And we talked previously about the lack of local data or local performance information, which this new strategy is looking to strengthen. We've had some officer discussions now. We have a meeting on Friday to talk to our colleagues in the corporate performance team. I notice on the agenda you've got an item today to talk about the new framework. So part of that will be about strengthening how do we measure our effectiveness, what impact are those actions having, are they even the right actions? And I think part of the strategic discussion will be if the actions aren't having the intended impact or the partnership believe that there are other actions that would have a greater return on investment, that the partnership can quickly vary its approach and move towards those more pertinent, impactful actions.
It's just that some of the strategy items seem to be internal facing rather than the external facing and the partnership working and the provision of services. And the pursuing perpetrators to reduce offending. Those don't seem to be coming through in your strategy content at all, really.
Yeah, I understand how you can determine that. I think what we've attempted to do here in this paper is just to give an overview. So we've just lifted out half a dozen bullet points. In terms of looking at the current strategy, all 5 of those partnership working, prevention, provision of services, etc. under 5.3 are covered in the action plan. I do apologise that you don't have that in front of you, otherwise it would have helped because you'd be able to see the detailed actions that contribute to them. But what we wanted to do was just lift out under section 5.5 those areas based on our review of the current strategy that will continue to be the high priority areas for Kirklees over the next 3 years.
Okay. You have another question, Liz? Okay.
Sorry. The increase in opportunities through West Yorkshire local booths for accommodation and children affected by domestic abuse. How is that progressing? I'm sorry I don't have the strategy document, but how are you going to put that in place and in what timescales?
So again, when we met last time, we talked about some of the short-term arrangements with regards to funding, and a lot of the streams and pathways are based on national funding pots. This is one of those again, so the Home Office put out some additional funding opportunities which the Council and partners had applied for. We're still awaiting feedback, but much of that work will be predicated on the response we get back and the feedback we get back from the national agencies on this. Irrespective of whether Kirklees is successful, we have had some contingency-based conversations locally as to, should we not get the full amount of funding, what can we do as an alternative, and those conversations continue. So I'd be happy to bring some of that detail back when that's a bit more furnished.
Okay, can you make sure that the action plan gets recirculated to members? It's not adopted till March 2019, so if there's any concerns you have, we can flag that up in good time. We've got plenty of time. Right, Golfan, so before I start the questions, quick one.
On page 33, you've got the 5 points, the action plan. You've got partnership work in preventing violence, abuse, provisions, victim, survivor, pursuing perpetrators, and so on. The key is you've got somebody who's going through this abuse. And the first thing is that how do we actually, the awareness, and it's not just general public, but one of the other big problems, and this is recent came across, was how businesses are dealing with this. Because they witness, workers are coming in with a bruised eye, X, Y, and Z, the number of telltale signs. How do we liaise with these businesses to actually deal with it? Because that comes into awareness. So far, you've got, the White Ribbon, a number of other organisations dealing with this. You also mentioned about the budget restrictions we've got in terms of, do we have the money to deal with this kind of stuff? Because ultimately, this is, if somebody's suffering, and the awareness needs to be, and that's to the local businesses as well, to liaise with them, because it's about having a healthy environment for their employees that they benefit in the long term as well as we do in terms of getting that strategy. And that partnership needs to include local businesses, some form where they can, a lot of them have no idea. All they're going to do is Google something and say, well, actually, how do we deal with this? Literally, it's almost like hitting a brick wall. And that's something that we need, that partnership included in with local businesses. And majority of this stuff, it's police. Somebody rings in, switchboard, and saying, by the way, I've got concerns. We instantly be passing it on to the police. So in terms of what powers do we have? Because the police will deal with it. Does it come back to us? For the intents and purposes of people watching this webcast and actually trying to understand how this is, this looks fantastic, it looks great, but how does it all fit in?
Thank you, Councillor Asif. I think where we've come to with this agenda, and all areas have come to, is that the response to domestic abuse is now more joined up than it ever has been. I think there's still room for improvement, and you've very clearly highlighted a helpful one there in terms of the business side, raising awareness and promoting that awareness of domestic abuse. Part of what we're trying to do with this new strategy is, of course, use the focus on early intervention and prevention. We've had some successes. We've got some of the more high-risk arrangements in place. We talked about the multi-agency risk assessment conference last time. We also talked about the role of the independent domestic violence advisors. I think those things are absolutely critical. They remain. The IDVA role is quite crucial because it supports victims to sort of navigate through the system, and we're looking to retain that, if not strengthen that. That's an absolutely critical role for me. I think also in terms of the future, it's about getting the response right the first time, because we know that often people will have several disclosures of abuse before they get an adequate response. And it's about us assuring ourselves as a partnership that the response is an effective response and we're acting in an early intervention fashion. I do get the point about awareness raising with the business sector, and I think that's part of reaching out with our procurement colleagues and looking at some of those supply side solutions. How do we get in there? How do we build these things into, say, contracts, for instance? And we've done things like that previously with regards to things like modern day slavery. So I think we can take some lessons from there. You also asked about communities and strengthening points of contact. So I read into the question. I think absolutely strengthening those interfaces with communities, with professionals, with health professionals, GPs, etc., is going to be a critical part of what we're trying to do here. We've had some good conversations with GPs raising their awareness. We undertook some workshop sessions with them a few months back. Some good feedback came out from that. I think it'd be really helpful to work with elected members as well as sort of ambassadors for communities and look to how we increase that awareness raising through yourselves.
I just want to ask a couple of questions.
Sorry, can I just
because I think this will help. Because if I can just ask a couple of points about what's on the action plan, because I think it relates to what you just said. There's a few things on the action plan which I'm lucky enough to have. First of all, the action plan needs a glossary. It's impossible to navigate without a glossary. It's because too many initialisms and abbreviations. But one of the points in the action plan, it says enhance information available for partners and service users through the new corporately designed Kirklees website. And then it says in the September update that the information has been reviewed. However, due to capacity in our corporate comms team, the publication of the information on the website has been delayed. Now, they can't Google the information, partners, and that because we haven't been able to get it uploaded because we've got a shortage of staff. So is that something that we as a committee can help with?
Councillor Turner, I would welcome any support that the committee can give. I think absolutely, when we met last time, we talked about the focus being on the high-risk services, and that's absolutely fine. But if this strategy is going to succeed over the next 3 years, early intervention is an absolutely crucial part of that. Awareness raising through things like online web platforms, through communities is absolutely crucial. And I think if the committee can help unblock some of that, I'd really value that.
I mean, when it comes to the awareness and linking in with businesses, like you said, you know, the research and everything, data involved in this, it is the victims. It's not the first time. It's an ongoing process that they've gone through. And it's almost like they accept it as normal. And businesses have no idea how do you deal with this, because the only fun solution that they've got is possibly reported to the police. That might be the ultimate case, but might not be the best solution for that person right there. So it's how do you link that training awareness? It's almost like having a health and safety officer, you know, or somebody who's trained up for that. Maybe the training the businesses can actually pay for towards having one person or point of contact who actually can go back and be sensitive and has a bit more understanding of this issue and how they can deal with it. I mean, the ultimate case could be going to the police, but it's all the steps taken. So it's a combination of things in there.
Respond to that, then I've got Rob and then Carl.
I will definitely take that back, Councillor. So if I think that's it's one of those challenges in that, in and amongst everything else, with a very finite budget, where's the best return on investment? And often we have to make some of those very crucial decisions as to where that money is best put so that we get the highest rate of return. I think it's something we will definitely have made a note of the specific point about businesses and how we, and I will definitely take that back, and I'm happy to come back or certainly report back in terms of progress and how the strategy is taking shape in terms of our interface with businesses in that context.
Yeah, from section 5.5, the bottom bullet point on page 33 refers to further work, development work with Community Plus and the schools as community hubs. I very much welcome that. In my discussions with head teachers through my local community hub and with individual discussions with them, I know this has been a real concern to them, that in the past they've sometimes found it quite difficult to get speedy response when they've had concerns about domestic abuse. And this is quite a frequent occurrence, often linked to issues such as drug and alcohol abuse. To what extent have discussions already taken place with head teachers on an individual basis or with schools as community hubs?
I think we can do a lot better with schools. One of the successes that we highlighted previously was the Operation Encompass, and that's a education and police partnership which Kirklees has sort of put into and invested into. And that enables that very early sort of intervention with children who are affected by domestic abuse. So the safeguarding leads in schools can get involved with the police and look to sort of targeting and intervening early. I think, again, we've also got a member on our domestic abuse strategic partnership that sort of represents schools and represents sort of education service. And we're looking to continuing strengthening our relationship with that individual and the sort of route into schools. It's interesting that you've had that feedback through your discussions and your sort of constituent discussions around the difficulties in navigating things through a pathway of domestic abuse. I'll take that back because it's something that I'm concerned about, but I think we can do a lot better because that's not something that I've been made aware of in terms of the challenges that school head teachers have navigating through the process.
Right. I'm quite surprised, actually, that has not fed back, particularly as one of the former leads within the Cabinet. I actually asked them to come along to meet with a group of head teachers in my ward, and this is one of the things that they raised, and there were about 6 or 7 head teachers present at that meeting. So this has been something that's been raised over the last couple of years.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I think we'll want to link in with their safeguarding leads and look to doing that same piece of work around awareness raising, a refresh on the pathways in Kirklees so that they feel better equipped to respond to those concerns.
Okay, Carl, then Liz.
Thank you, Chair. Just to go over some of what was said previously about businesses being involved and also in communities and about relaying this information, having a clear overview of the processes involved in reporting of incidences and being clear the person reporting this is understanding what will happen and the steps and the stages involved in the first point of call, and also clear information for any of the victims involved. They're clear. So some kind of pathway or clear process where I think would be extremely useful. I'm concerned that there's nothing on the website and there's nothing online available, and the reasons for that. So that's quite worrying, really, that whilst you, and I believe that, you know, the update in here, that you've got a good handle on everything that's happening from a strategic point of view, that in use and on the ground, that it wouldn't be the case.
So in terms of the website, there is a presence online, and the action plan indicates that some of that has been reviewed. We have done a piece of work where we're looking at further refining what's on there, and that's the challenge, which is trying to build that into the capacity of our corporate web team. But I absolutely take that on board, Councillor. I think if in the strategy one of the key facets is to raise awareness and enhancing the information offer, we can't achieve that unless we've got a good, coherent presence online. With regards to navigating the pathway, I'd be happy to come along and talk to party groups about domestic abuse again, sort of look at raising that shared awareness. Happy to also share a view of the pathways and the sort of reporting routes. I said earlier, for victims, the IDVA is an absolutely critical role, as are some of our domestic abuse advisors within the council, and they support victims to sort of navigate through what might be a very complex system. We've recently commissioned a bit of research, a bit of evaluation on the IDVA role itself, and that's come through. That's proving to be very positive. The feedback on that is proving to be very, very good. Again, we're looking at how we continue to retain that function because it's funded through some short-term money, so that's part of the ongoing discussions. So
just to recap, this action plan is not to be adopted till March, so it's still a working document that can be developed. So what we're contributing today can help shape it, can't it? So it's still shaping. But on this action plan, I'll bring Liz in just a sec, but this action plan does mention the directory of services for staff that's been created, within all services to refer to. And it also mentions an easy-to-understand version of domestic abuse information that's been produced to be circulated widely for practitioners. So there's some really useful stuff there, and I wondered if that can be summarised for councillors, so all councillors can have that, because I know it's something that Rob's panels raised concerns about previously, having a guide for councillors. So if that can be added to the action plan, that'd be really good. Sorry, Liz.
On your early intervention and prevention work, I would have thought that the awareness raising was a key part of that. And certainly we used to have a lot of awareness around the helpline that we had. where people could confidentially ring if they needed help. And all of that awareness raising seems to have not be as visible as it used to be. So, because somebody not necessarily going to naturally come to the council, or maybe not want to go to the police in the first instance. So, there used to be somewhere where people could ring. Is that still the case? And how do people know that?
So I can give committee members assurance that pathways and solutions like that are still absolutely in place. You will know about the Pennine Domestic Violence Group. They're our third sector partner in the delivery of our domestic abuse strategy. They do some fantastic work and they offer up a number of those routes in, including a helpline. Forgive me, because the action plan that some of you will have seen or may not have seen perhaps, and the content of the report, it's lifting out just some of the more summary aspects of the strategy itself. So again, I do apologise that it's not giving you a complete view, but the discussion we had previously, I hope, would have given you some assurance that those things are in place, the functions, the roles are there. Staff do go through training, for instance, on domestic abuse and the sort of key signs, the key factors that link to that. So that again forms part of their mandatory training around ensuring they're clued up on those things.
I think my point is that it used to be far more obvious, and you don't see it as much now. As a ward councillor, you don't see that awareness raising that we used to see in domestic abuse, and where somebody can ring. And so if we're not seeing it in the communities, where is the awareness of where you can get help? I think that's my point. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a valid point. I'll take a note of that.
Can I just ask then, I'm going to talk to the Police and Crime Panel on Friday around prevention particularly, but I know that there's been some bids submitted to do some more work around work with perpetrators, more low-level perpetrators, more low risk, and also around do some research with children about how we can support children that are witnesses of victims of abuse. So I just wonder if you've got any feedback on that yet.
I'd really value your support on that, Councillor Turner. I think Kirklees has put in some applications for funding, national funding, on both supporting children who are affected by domestic abuse, but also looking at accommodation across the district, refuge accommodation. Both those areas we're still awaiting feedback on, and we continue to talk to the police about strengthening some of our existing arrangements. I'll ask Alexia, because she's a lot more closer to this stuff, I'll ask Alexia to give a bit of a summary and send you that through. I know she met with you previously just to sort of give you a bit of a briefing, but specifically on those two aspects, I'll get a bit of a briefing note together so you have that in readiness for Friday to help your conversations.
We know that there is some work that's taking place with high-risk repeat offenders, perpetrators, but it's the low-risk stuff that there's no funding. Funding's been reduced for, so we need to try and pick that up on the prevention plan. What's the other thing I was going to ask you is a K&H. There's been talk about how supporting victims with housing accommodations, so we're waiting some feedback from K&H about their input into the strategy, and I wondered if you've got any updates on that yet.
K&H, again, are key partners on the domestic abuse partnership group, and on that specific point I don't have any feedback, but they're a key part of the strategy in terms of raising their awareness, or certainly raising awareness of their staff in relation to domestic abuse and the factors that contribute to those. Also, how do they respond if a victim makes any disclosures around domestic abuse, forms a continued part of our work with K&H. I don't have any specific details in front of me, Councillor Turner, I do apologise, but again I can let you have that through Alexia if you wish.
Yeah, I think we'd like to see the updated plan circulated in good time before it's adopted, so in case anyone's got anything they'd like to add to it. the other thing I was going to just mention is raising awareness has been raised. It's a really important point about how we raise awareness about abuse and how to report it and how to support people. We should like to tell people about the recent campaigns that you've had, because I think that was a really good example of the work that's being done. So it's not that nothing's happening, it's just being careful. And I think the work around the World Cup that was done recently was really good, and you might want to let people know about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to push some of that out. I think we talked last time about the White Ribbon campaign, and that was a really successful partnership event that Kirklees, the council, hosted. So we are White Ribbon accredited, and we continue to promote that. And I think there's a 15 days of action very soon with regards to the White Ribbon in November. So we'll be looking to support that also with some comms and some promotional awareness. We also are building on some of the successful marketing that's been done previously. The action plan references the branding that was used before with regards to It's Never Okay. And part of that, it's about us, the partnership, assuring ourselves that any marketing activity, again, is having the intended impact. So part of what we're learning from is ensuring that where we are engaging in marketing work and investing in marketing, it's reaching the right people and it's having the intended sort of impact that we're looking for. The World Cup campaign through PDVG, through other partners, again, has been really successful, very, very well received, some really good feedback. So it's just taking lessons from those things that work well and continuing to scale that out where we can. And using the sort of reduced, or certainly using the finite resources that we have in the best possible way.
Any final questions? No, I hope you found that useful to help you to developing the plan, and look forward to seeing it come back to us.
I would look forward to bringing that back here so we can take some valuable input from Scrutiny indeed. So I'd welcome the opportunity to come back here. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like we're a little ahead of schedule. It's changed. So it's due at 1:45, did you say? 1:45. Okay, so should we jump to the foot when Rob gets back? Unless anyone would like to have a 2 minutes comfort break? Yep, we'll have 2 minutes. Thank you. Now everyone's a bit refreshed. We'll move on to the next item, which is about corporate performance framework. As you know, we've talked about this a while, about how it gets revised and refreshed for the whole council, not individual services, there's a whole council approach to it. And I'm delighted that Mike's been able to join us, because I think he's doing an amazing job from our conversation before, and he's brought you a summary of what's going there. So Mike, it's only a brief paper, so if you want to take, we're short on time, so I've been trying to speed everybody up on their presentations, because we've got a lot to cover, but it's only a short paper, so feel free to take us through it.
Thank you. Good morning. Over the summer, the Council undertook a review of its corporate performance management arrangements. Based on the findings of the review, there's a number of changes being implemented to improve the Council's framework. The changes aim to place the focus firmly on how performance improves outcomes, using the intelligence and analysis to fully understand how Council performance is part of the wider public service system, alongside external factors, impacts and outcomes, putting a greater emphasis on quality over quantity, and building a performance picture for individual places and groups of people across the Council. To enable this, a number of the key changes will be made to the Council's framework. These include establishing a strategic lead who will provide ownership and oversight for performance against each of the Kirklees outcomes, having some specialist support to develop and deliver an intelligence-led, impartial narrative on performance for the Council, and introducing a more robust assessment of our performance with a focus on historical change over time, what future projections look like, and how we compare in terms of our performance with other areas. Am I right? Thank you. The new arrangements will aim to provide members, council officers and citizens with intelligence and insight about our performance rather than just data, provide assurance about how the council is performing, provide greater transparency about the performance of individual places, and provided evidence base of progress towards the delivery of the Council's corporate plan. Most importantly, also to encourage strategic discussion around key strategic issues rather than being pulled into operational detail. So that's a quick summary of the paper, and happy to take any questions from members.
Can I just say, when did you join the council? January. He's done a lot in a very short amount of time, so I'm really pleased about it. And I like that we've got an independent hub for corporate performance now, which reduces any kind of conflict people might have within the services. It's fantastic. So open up to questions. Have you got any more questions? Liz? If it's crackling, use the other one.
Seems to be okay at the minute, doesn't it? On page 39, you set out the targets with the analytical tests. And at item 2 there, you've got other areas. I just want to check that the other areas is not other areas within the council, but it's other areas external to the council. And also, how are your intelligence performance leads going to provide that unbiased, impartial way? One of the consultation responses was to ensure we have an impartial and independent picture of our performance. Now, I would take that as looking outward rather than something internal to the council. So how is that being achieved? Thank you.
Okay, so to confirm in terms of other areas, we're talking about other local authorities as opposed to internal to council services. In May this year, the council brought together a number of staff from across the organisation who work in intelligence performance roles into a single corporate service. Having those staff within a corporate hub allows us to provide that impartiality as opposed to them being aligned to individual service and business units where they didn't really have or weren't really empowered to be able to tell that story and that narrative. So working with strategic directors and heads of service across the organisation to challenge that narrative and challenge that story and make sure it's evidence-based and fact-based before it's presented.
That is still internal to the council. That hub is still internal to the council. It's not internal to services, but it's internal to the council. So how is independent challenge on the council's performance being put in that is not internal to the council?
Okay, I think a key part of these new arrangements is the role of scrutiny panels and elected members in terms of scrutinising challenges at some performance and how we can support members to do that, so that we've got that independent challenge, I suppose, coming from members, and we'll do as much as we possibly can internally to provide that independence. But yeah, accepting that part of it is we are still part of the council, but more of a corporate hub as opposed to aligned to individual services.
And can you just pick up on how the individual panels can make use of the intelligence hub, please?
Absolutely. So we're available to members in the same way we're available to council officers. So if there are questions or areas that members would like to explore in terms of getting more detailed insight around outcomes, the council's activity, demand, performance, we're there, and you can commission us to do any kind of detailed piece of insight or analysis that you'd like.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to work with you directly to discuss what type of report might be of most value to a particular panel. So my own particular panel is economy and neighbourhoods, which is quite broad, really. So it would be good to look at how we could produce something which picks up the key issues in a form that is understandable by elected members and would allow them to become involved in a more meaningful questioning and debate of the issues.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, just on that point, we've had discussions before, children and young people's, looking at the reports that we receive and the performance and being able to understand that and getting the information that we require is not always the case. But I understand there may be issues around that about workloads and timescales to be able to do that. But how achievable would that be to work with individual panels in order to achieve that?
I think the opportunities to do that we'd more than welcome, and I suppose we've got the resources and the capacity to do that. It's just realigning some of our existing work. So if there's work we can do with the individual panels, the panel chairs and panel members to make sure that what you're getting is meaningful, timely and robust so you can actually provide effective scrutiny, yeah, I'd more than welcome that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not part of this report, so I'm just giving you an insight from the corporate side of it as a lead member. One of the issues that we had, and John, one of the panel members, raised it, is how are targets set? And it was the case of, do we pick this, and it was kind of a collective view, that do we pick this random figure from thin air? And then how do you measure that target? And what we've tried doing is, we did have issue in the first year, but this municipal year, we tried putting targets which are realistic, and this is the kind of message that we're passing on to the officers, is have realistic targets. Don't just pull them in thin air. And how do we measure the success on that? I know Graham in the past has mentioned on terms of, the green, the red and the amber, how we're performing. There were a number of different kind of indicators that they used, and it was like 10 pages of it. That's been narrowed down. In terms of the accountability and the scrutiny, the corporate panel, it goes through the process of the chair's briefing, and then it goes into the actual panel meeting. And we have, the best intentions trying to hold the officers, the council, and sometimes I think we've been pushing it too far. But realistically, this is an ongoing thing. So it's not a criticism, but it's more of a, a work in progress to be seen. Myself and others, we've got concerns. How do we improve it even more? And maybe we're a bit more real ambitious than expected. But this is an ongoing thing. And that is one of the biggest problems we have. How do you measure something? Is it a success? Because it's all the different services that we offer. It doesn't come into things. So.
No, I think very valid points. And it is ongoing. It is only at the beginning. So you've not had a new style of report yet. So, but I'm sure Mike can pick up on the target setting and how we're assessing new targets. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think one of the key aspects of this new framework is to remove the focus around targets and more about applying a set of analytical tests so we understand how performance looks within different places across Kirklees, because quite often the Kirklees figures mask some of the kind of inequalities and diversity across the borough. So it'll give us the ability to drill down and have a look what that looks like on a place basis and also across different demographics across the borough. But also apply those tests in terms of, as we touched on before, how performance compares against different areas, what it looks like over time, what we're projecting it to look like in the future, rather than looking at what performance looks like against an arbitrary target that's set at the beginning of each year. And also understanding how external factors, be that national government policy or local factors around individual public services, impact on outcomes.
I just want to come back. I think, Chair, when you and I got onto the council, 18 years ago, first time round, we had this system in place, and it's almost like gone back full circle. So this is the first year that we're kind of looking at the whole new system of scrutiny. So there's going to be certain things that are going to be new or kind of coming back in again, and I think it's members to actually decide what they want and how they want things, especially on scrutiny, whether it be corporate or any other. Because ultimately, as you go along, I mean, the one thing we've put in place with finance, and Eamon had multiple different things, and Eamon wasn't really sure exactly what we want, so we kind of put bullet points as to exactly the key issues that we wanted to raise and for him to have details. So that's improved. So I think over the next coming years, things will improve and will kind of settle in. But right now, it's kind of trial and error.
Well, yeah, you're right. We are only at the beginning of the process in this new structure. This structure is brand new. It's not something that we've had for 18 years. So I think it's the beginning of a journey, but I'm very optimistic. I'm really pleased with the vision and the efforts outlined by the corporate team. My biggest concern is how we get all of the council to buy into it, because it is looking at setting new targets that are realistic, that's measurable, to have real outcomes. so we know that we're getting real outcomes and how we report on that. And I think some of the councils buy into that a lot quicker and a lot more easily than other parts. So you've mentioned that in your report. If you want to just pick up on that.
Yeah, so we're doing work. So different services and different directorates across the council are more used to working, I suppose, with an outcomes focus and using intelligence. So we've been doing work with both the corporate directors and also the senior management teams in each of the directorates to get them ready for this. I think, as we touched on earlier, this is very much an iterative process. So what we want to do is develop those feedback loops so that we can get members' feedback and kind of design what kind of report and what kind of product suits basically the needs of both members, council officers and citizens.
Yes, Liz.
Yeah, I come back to the external challenge because all of this is still council with challenging the council. And so I wonder if you could look at how you're going to get external independent challenge on a regular basis to the council's performance. Because I think it is an important thing that we do have that external challenge on a regular basis, and so that we're not just saying, okay, we're improving year on year in this area and this area, and we're not in this area and this area. But in actual fact, are we, is our performance right in the right areas? And I think that external challenge on a regular basis should be looked at.
Yep, absolutely. So I suppose there's opportunities in terms of how we can do some of that through peer review and peer challenges. We've obviously got the regulatory activity that takes place across the council and the self-assessment processes that take place. And one of the key aspects of a number of those frameworks, particularly the Ofsted frameworks, are around how well you know yourself. So if regulators come in and we aren't clear in terms of understanding where our areas of underperformance and plans for improvement are, then we'll be pulled up on that. So that's more of an incentive to make sure that internally we're confident in our understanding around our performance.
Yeah. I know from my own professional experience that peer review can be very useful using benchmarking and comparing the performance of different organisations in different places. I know we do some work with other councils in terms of reviewing our performance. Is there scope for more of that to meet the kind of need that Liz has raised earlier?
I'd say absolutely. I mean, one of the first opportunities I've identified since starting work for Kirklees was the opportunity across West Yorkshire and more widely across Yorkshire and Humber, how we can do some of that kind of peer support on a regional and sub-regional basis. So I'll be developing those links and working with other councils in the area to understand how we can do that on a more regular basis.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to point out something that said about the external, any reviews or kind of checks and balances externally. When it comes to elected members, this panel including the panel, management committee and the panel members, it is cross-party. Nobody holds back. I know we, as the council, but when it comes to the kind of holding officers to account, there's no politics in that, and certainly nobody is holding back. I know for a fact one or two panel members on corporate have been quite open and vocal in terms of exactly what they need to see and some of the issues that you and I have spoken about, concerns. So when it comes to the external aspect, I think we, even though we have got the represent the council, we also represent the external side of it, because as elected members we look from both sides and we have that scope. So there's a lot of checks and balances. I think simply to have that take and saying we've got somebody independent to look into this probably might not have the insight to what we do. So we've got
I think definitely, elected members have a lot of strengths and experiences that they, from working not just within the council but from different organisations. So they can have, but I also get where Liz is coming from. If the corporate performance from the council is managed internally, I don't think there's a way around that. We need to have some way of assessing ourselves, some self-assessment. I'm so delighted that we've got as a separate independent hub within the council now that's not based within the individual services. I think that helps a lot. But I know that Mike's team are not constrained into where they can access this information. So if they want to, if we've got particular issues that we want them to look at, they can look outside of the council as well for that sources of information, just as we can as scrutiny committees. All of the scrutiny committees can source information from other areas as well. It's not just within the council. So, Cathal.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a comment further on what's been said. Obviously, yes, elected members do have that role to play and do it quite well, very effectively. But I also welcome the opportunity to work on the regional level for that peer assessment as well, and also the opportunity for panels to be able to look at the information they require as well going forward.
I think what you're doing is great, and we're moving in the right direction. I am concerned that some areas are not buying into it as quickly as others. So I think I'd like to, if you agree, have some recommendation from here that goes to the leader and the chief exec to push this forward to make sure we get buy-in from across the council, because I think it's the right direction and I think it would be healthy. And I'd also like to just remind you that there are other sources of information. I know that I've asked Penny about getting information from the local government association about commercialisation, because there's other sources of information that we can tap into as well. So I'd encourage you all to do that, especially for your panellists, because you are heavily challenged from a range of different sources, aren't you, outside of the council? So, go for it.
Yeah, the one thing I do like to see further on this is when it comes to commercialisation, we've not set any targets. No, we've not set targets, but we need to be ambitious in terms of exactly what do we need to bring in, some kind of a figure that we need actually on there, and so we can work towards it. Because sometimes the issue is that when we come up with strategic paper, there's nothing to say that that's the kind of what we're aiming for. So that's one thing. I mean, Rachel's been fantastic in terms of holding, the fort and what she's been done in such a short space of time. But that target has to be set exactly when we're talking about commercialisation. What is the figure we're aiming at, and what timescale we're looking at?
It's just one example of where you can access the different information. Exactly. But yeah, that's a piece of pre-scrutiny work, so the council's just starting to develop that, and that challenge about where we want to go would be really useful. That's part of the pre-scrutiny challenge. I think it's good. But yeah, just an example of where you can source other sorts of information. Is that okay with you, Mike? Is that helpful? Can you just, right, so the next stage then is what information does get presented at what stage then for the panels?
So the Q2 report will come to the committee in January. So that will be the new formatted quarterly performance report. That again, this is the first iteration of the report, so we'd welcome feedback as part of that process to build into the next version of the report, and we'll go away and look at how we can work with individual scrutiny panels, both in terms of the content and the format of the reports going forwards.
Yeah. Certainly when that report comes out, what I would welcome would be an opportunity to meet with you before and to have a look at it in some detail to help me understand the report itself, if that's possible.
I think it'd be useful for each of the panel leads to meet with Mike and his team to look at what information you need and look at your work programmes and where you might be able to get some extra help as well. You up for doing that, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Mike. That's been really helpful. And then moving on next to Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Licensing Policy. Team, if you'd like to come forward and go through this with us. Now, licensing stuff, yes, wherever you feel comfortable. You sit on the front row. And when I bring you in, if you'd like to introduce yourself for people listening on the webcast, that'd be good. And while you get settled, I was just going to say we don't normally have licensing issues come here because we have a separate panel that looks at that, licensing committee. But I understand that you welcome some alternative challenge because it's newer. There's some new issues, as I understand. So if you'd like to just highlight what that is, you don't need to go through the whole report because we do a limited time. But if you highlight what's new this year, what's different, that'd be really helpful. Okay.
This is a result of that. The purpose of the licensing regime is to protect the public, and that's what this policy is about. It is, parts of it are new, and because of that we have to go out to consultation. It's a requirement, and we will be going out this week for consultation up until the 19th of January. There are three aspects or three groups that I think we need to look at in relation to this. There are ourselves, the regulators, the police, public health. There are the drivers who will be impacted by it, and then there are the public, particularly vulnerable members of the public. And that's why we welcome it coming to you for you to scrutinise us. We're embedded within licensing on a daily basis. It's always good to have fresh pairs of eyes. And I'm just conscious, I haven't introduced myself, so you haven't a clue I am. It's Wendy Blakely, I'm Head of Public Protection. I do know most of you. Sam and Russell are the ones who have really developed this policy, so I'm going to hand over to them.
Not used to being on this side. My name is Samantha Lawton and I'm Operations Manager in Public Protection. So the three different aspects are, first of all, the Kirklees policy. Russell and I are new into post, and when we looked at the review of licensing, we realised there was bits of policy about, but there wasn't an overarching policy that brought together all aspects of taxi licensing. So that's what we've been trying to do this summer, so that there is one comprehensive, coherent policy that you can look to that sets standards, sets expectations and sets processes. And so that's what we hope we've done within the policy. There are some new things in the policy. One of the new things is there will be a greater emphasis on 3-year licences. At the moment, most of the licences we issue in licensing is for 1 year. And the move to... This came in some time ago, in 2015. Local authorities were allowed to issue 3-year licences, but there wasn't much take-up at Kirklees, so we're looking to develop that further, and that's new. The second area is a revised standard of testing. And the revised standard of testing will be looking at emissions testing. And this will be to start to encourage the take-up of low-emission vehicles. And linking it to the Euro standards means that this is an industry-wide standard that already exists and that is measured. And a lot of the West Yorkshire local authorities have already introduced this. And if you are a local authority who has a clean air zone, the guidance that is currently issued is linked to the Euro standards. So in order to get in the clean air zone, you will have to have a vehicle that complies with the guidance. Some local authorities, such as Leeds, are looking to make it more stringent. So they're looking to go further than what we have gone. So at the moment, we are looking to go at least in line with the guidance that's been issued. The third change is in Appendix B, we've added 2 new conditions to drivers' conditions, and those are they must cooperate with any authorised officer and or that's on page, it's in Appendix B, they're not, so if you go to Appendix B, it's conditions number 21 and 22. Sorry, apologies, my copy isn't paginated. And these are new conditions. The first one at number 21 is as a result of there's been a recent working group from the Department for Transport, and they made a lot of recommendations. At the moment, if you're from another licensing authority, you wouldn't be able to go into operators in Kirklees. So we've opened that up so that operators must comply with any officers that attend their offices looking at licensing. And we've also introduced a code of conduct for working with vulnerable people. And that's been new to us. We haven't had that before at Kirklees, and we felt that some guidance was needed for taxi drivers. And that's really the main changes in the Kirklees policy, and the fact that we now have an overarching taxi policy. The second item is Appendix A, and this is what we refer to as the convictions policy. At the moment, Kirklees does have a convictions policy, but this policy that's been agreed West Yorkshire-wide is more stringent, what we would call more robust. We are hoping it will upskill taxi drivers and it will raise standards. And the real changes are, if we look at the table that's included in it, at Appendix A, which is on page 8 of Appendix A to me, it sets out a period of time that must have been elapsed between different types of offences. And they've been increased quite a lot. So at the moment, our policy kind of says between around 3 years and 5 years, but now we're moving up to 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, and we're saying if it's some types of offending, then there will be no period that will be sufficient. Now that doesn't mean that's not fettering. We can still take each case on its merits, but that's our starting point, really, if you appear with a, murder or manslaughter conviction. So that's the convictions policy, and we are hoping that will be aligned across West Yorkshire. So it is a more robust convictions policy, and the intention is that it will apply to new drivers, and it will be applied to existing drivers upon renewal. And then the third aspect, which is been agreed across West Yorkshire, is the driver training policy. When the West Yorkshire Harmonisation Project began, all the different 6 local authorities train in a slightly different way. And really, as a taxi driver, is health and safety any different in Kirklees than it is in York or Wakefield? It's not really. So we've come together as local authorities to say, look, what are the modules you must need to look at to be a taxi driver? Which are the key ones? The other new aspect of driver training will be the inclusion of refresher training. 5 of the 6 local authorities, there's only Bradford, I think, that does refresher training at the moment. So this will be new to Kirklees, and drivers will have to undergo refresher training every 3 years. Not in all of the modules, but in the key ones, so they are keeping up to date in terms of safeguarding, CSE and all the rest of it. And we thought that was important. The other aspect is the testing. So the modules have been broken down, and there's a 90% pass rate. Now, that on the face of it may seem quite high, but we've had to align 6 different local authorities, and pass rates have ranged between 68% and 90%, and I think Leeds is currently 90%, and we're unwilling to come down effectively. So we've had to move to a more, some authorities have had to come down, some have had to go up, but in order to align, this is where we've come to in this agreed document here. And again, this will apply to new drivers, and it will apply to existing drivers. And, we will be happy to assist drivers and to make sure we signpost them. So if there is some drivers, we understand it will have an impact for some drivers, and we will happily signpost them to whatever training they need or assist them to complete those modules if they need assistance with that. It's not going to be a case of you've got this conviction or you can't pass this module, that's it. So that we envisage there'll be a period of time where we'll give them time to complete that and signpost them to the right places to enable them to do that. So those are the policies that we're going out to consult upon. Okay.
Morning. My name is Russell Williams. I'm Group Leader for Licensing. The consultation side of these policies starts this week, and as West Yorkshire we've all agreed that we will go out to consultation at the same time. The only difference to that is Bradford, because they're looking at they're consulting a different way to the other West Yorkshire authorities, so they're engaging with their trade separately. As the stated, consultation starts this week. It'll run until the 18th, 19th of January. That's just over 8 weeks consultation period, we will be writing out to all licence holders, advising them of the consultation. There's a web link for a survey that will be online, so they can look at the policies and then complete the survey online. All the responses across West Yorkshire will be collated by the project coordinator, and we will then look at those responses and we either compare and see whether they're valid representations, whether we need to make changes to the policy, and if we do, then we'll have to agree those changes at a West Yorkshire level. Once agreement's been reached, we will then have to come back to the Licensing and Safety Committee for the formal approvals process. That's looking towards the end of February, March next year, that we will be going back to the Licensing and Safety Committee. We will also be welcome representations from members of the public. The public will be invited to look at the policies and comment likewise, and we will be working with the press team to get that message out to the members of the public. Okay.
Thank you for the report. It's very in-depth and reassuring to see a lot of what's in here that will reassure members of the public and members as well. Just on 2.5 for policy and about testing of low emissions. Air quality is a big issue within Kirklees. We've had a number of air quality management areas in the last year. In our aim and aspiration to ensure that people within Kirklees experience high quality, clean, sustainable and green environment, what are we going to do to further that? Because you mentioned that Leeds are going to do more. Are there more aspiration perhaps than us? When will we look to be on a par with them?
Yeah, the proposals that are in the policy that's going out to consultation, we see them as a starting point. There is a separate project within West Yorkshire looking at the vehicle specification altogether, and part of that process we will then look to the other local authorities to see whether we're all going to go to the Leeds standard or make other changes to our vehicle specification so it's more harmonised. We were quite keen to get these in as soon as possible, given the issues we've got with air quality, but we do see them as a starting point rather than an end point.
Sorry, can I just add to that? In relation to air quality, the Leeds area has had a compulsory clean air zone, so they've been forced by government to do that. In Kirklees, we are leading on a project to introduce electric charging points for electric taxis, and that will be starting, and we're looking to aim to put 17 in across Kirklees initially, and we mentioned that to the taxi trade on Friday.
Yeah, I also welcome the report. I think to pull everything together in one document is a big step forward, and I think the areas where you've taken action to strengthen the policy are areas where there is public concern. I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the enforcement of this policy, including the opportunities for members of the public who are using taxis as passengers to make complaints or raise concerns. Are there proposals to change those kind of things alongside the policy?
I'll just speak a little bit about it. Russell has more day-to-day involvement in that, but we do investigate all complaints that come through to licensing service from members of the public. And when we do look at the complaint itself, they are all investigated, and action and the driver will be spoken to as a result of that. And when we look at deciding whether they are fit and proper, and really we use the word safe and suitable now, are they safe, are they suitable, we will be looking at it in comparison to that convictions policy. And that convictions policy does not just relate to convictions, it relates to behaviour as well. So even though they haven't been convicted of anything, we will also look at their behaviour. How have they behaved? Have they been aggressive and so forth? So it says, we call it a convictions policy, but it's about their suitability really as a taxi driver. And I know myself in my previous role, we've certainly taken action against taxi drivers where they haven't been convicted, but there has been maybe 2 complaints. I think in my case there was 3 complaints. None of them had come to fruition. All of them had been to the police, but none of them had gone any further. But purely on the basis of those complaints, we did take action and we did speak to the driver, and it did involve a revocation. So we are looking to move to stronger enforcement, and we have already made a request for more licensing officers, which has been approved, and we will be doing the recruitment of that certainly within the next couple of months.
Yeah, just a supplementary to that. I think it's a really positive thing that the policies have been harmonised across the West Yorkshire region. Will there also be harmonisation in terms of sharing information when a complaint is made? So if, for example, there's a complaint about a driver in Calderdale, would that also come through to you so you're aware of that?
Yeah, we are looking at our data sharing agreements with West Yorkshire authorities as well, and how we go forward sharing information. Recently, the National Anti-Fraud Network have launched the National Register of refused and revoked driver's licences. We're in the process of signing up to that and getting enrolled on that, and that will involve us having to upload potential data to that system, and it also gives us the ability to check other local authorities whether they've refused or revoked licences. But like I said, West Yorkshire-wide, we will be looking at how we can communicate locally the information that we hold.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Wendy. Sam, Russell. Just a few points. You know, you mentioned about the regional level discussions, the West Yorkshire Combined Authorities, how we operate in, but each one has different policies. I mean, the way they test the cars, the drivers, everything. So it's completely, you know, it's almost like cherry-picking what they want and what they want to keep. This is about Kirklees and how we can liaise with other councils, but it's also about setting certain standards internally. One, online information in terms of, you know, what we send out to the drivers, that's not up to date, to my understanding. Just to give you one example, the internal policies are that we don't send renewal letters, but yet, according to the website, we do. Wait for your renewal letter. It's only been changed when I highlighted it, passed it on to one of the executives, and I think I've not checked recently, but that was about a week ago. That information is still there. So when we change in the internal policies, we need to amend that. So because it's sending conflicting information. In terms of the testing, you've got the advanced taxi driver test. That's done internally. Are these internal examiners, are they DVLA examiners, or are they just have, you know, the ones we've got internal testers? That's one. CCTV in the taxis and private hire. This issue has been around for well over a decade. We talk about it. We talk about how we're going to do things, but yet, I remember years ago there was a kind of a grant where half the money came from, you know, the drivers had to fork for that, and we did the rest. How can we improve that? Because ultimately, we've gone through the whole policy, that's been renewed and everything, but can we make a concerted effort as to push that through? And the final point is, we've got everything. These checks and balances have existed. I remember years ago when I sat on the licensing committee and, you know, trying to take the magnetic stickers off and put the permanent ones. So people can't swap and change, and, you know, non-licensed vehicles going out there with magnetic stickers they're found on the floor and put it on as a taxi. We've improved a great deal. The one thing has not changed, and I've not seen a great deal of that, is how driver personal safety applies. What kind of training are we doing? We've seen a number of cases up and down the country, and when we use to strengthen our case, we use it that, you know, this happened and that happened and all the rest of it to win our argument. Yet a number of taxi drivers have been stabbed, murdered, you know, there's so many horrendous incidents, But I've not seen anything here to say what we as a council, actually we can give somebody a licence, but what are we doing to protect them? What we doing, how we liaising with the police? Because if a taxi driver rings in the police and saying, I've been attacked or something, it prioritises, how bad are you? You know, depending on, well, he's run up with a fare or he's taken my keys. There was a recent incident where a taxi was caught from Murfield train station, went to Huddersfield, and basically they didn't want to pay up, and they took his keys and almost beat him to death. And it was early hours of the morning when somebody he knocked on somebody's door and called the police because everything, his mobile phone, everything was in the car. Now, things like this, we've seen it recently. What are we doing? It's great putting these conditions in place, but we've got an onus on when we issue a licence, when we issue a vehicle, we need to take that responsibility as to how we're doing it. And that partnership with the police of actually concerted effort, not that, this is a private matter. We need to collectively deal with that, and that's an important issue.
There is a long list there, and I'll start, and I'm sure Sam and Russell will jump in. In relation to the bringing everything together across on a West Yorkshire wide, so we won't all have separate policies. The idea is that we will have a West Yorkshire policy. The two that we've brought, as Sam mentioned, was the fit and proper, the safe driver conditions, which is one, and then the other one is the training for the drivers. And as part of that training, we do talk about their own personal safety and what they can do in relation to working with the police. The other parts of the West Yorkshire bringing together includes the vehicle specification, CCTV, and I've lost the fifth one. Enforcement, West Yorkshire-wide enforcement. So we've brought in already West Yorkshire-wide enforcement, so we can all enforce across each other's borders, and if taxis come in from the other borders. CCTV and the vehicle specification. We've made a commitment that we will bring those begin by the end of the financial year. So what we didn't want to do was hold up the policies that we'd got ready. So we are still working on those. The CCTV is a tricky one. Rotherham introduced CCTV a number of years ago. We've identified that has had a few problems. And what we didn't want to do was jump to a system and introduce a system that we knew wasn't working, but it is something that we are looking.
With CCTV, there are a number of issues about who holds the data, whether it's recorded or audio, there are lots of different types of CCTV, what specification it should be, about whether it should be turned off when they're using it for personal use. There are lots of different aspects to CCTV, who pays for it, and where do they buy it from. So there's a number of different parts to CCTV. And as far as we're aware, there's only about 9 local authorities out of the 300 plus that have it as a mandatory condition. And in our Kirklees, we don't stop anyone from having it. They can implement it if they like. They can get CCTV and they can input it in their vehicle, but those are the issues with CCTV. So it's about coming together as West Yorkshire. What we don't want to introduce is say, we'll have this CCTV here in Kirklees, and then Wakefield have a different one, York have a different one, and Leeds, so forth. So we want to try and come together. And when the project was looked at, there was different areas to the project. So there was convictions, there was CCTV, there was vehicle specification. And as the project has moved along, the leaders have had to decide which ones we prioritise and which ones we work on. So we started with delegated enforcement, and we've done that and we've implemented that so everybody is authorised. We've now done convictions and driver training. CCTV and vehicle specification are the next two. And even then, the next West Yorkshire meeting it's on the agenda for December. So the work is ongoing. Please do not think that it isn't, but we are all committed.
Sam, just to come back on that one, when it comes to CCTV, this issue was around well over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And since then, technology has advanced.
Absolutely.
And when it comes to data storage and all the rest, I mean, we've gone through this process, the whole idea where other councils are using it. And one of the, the advancements that we've got is that, the devices are much smaller. Storage, you can hold a lot more rather than having a bulky system in the boot or somewhere. And one of the agreements back then was that actually it's the police and the council who've got access to it if there's an issue. There are drivers up and down the country who actually using CCTV, and it's an ad hoc, meaning they can, find whether it's cheaper, whatever the mindset behind having one. The point being is it makes passengers safe. That's one key aspect.
Yeah.
If you've got the data, when it comes to the legality and the data, this is what we need to kind of resolve as a collective, rather than saying,
I agree.
It's not, because ultimately, if a passenger gets in and realises that there's CCTV in there, they feel comfortable. The driver doesn't. I can give you a number of examples recently where things have come out, and it would make that person, the driver, the passenger, think twice before they do anything. Yeah, that's the key to it. And what I'm sorry, but I don't accept this idea that what you've just said, with respect, because ultimately we can put this in place. And if it's the issue of the money, I'm sure the drivers would actually pay towards. And the discussions many years ago was that, they're willing to pay towards this if it's fixed permanently and nobody's got access to it except the police and the council.
And we're certainly working towards that, Councillor. I hear everything you say, and we don't disagree. We would like to have it in place. We're just working to make that happen across 6 different local authorities. And so the work in relation to that is ongoing. And there will be a meeting as of in the next few weeks about it, and it's on the agenda, taking us right up until, I think, April time. And we're hoping to come to a final position. So it's definitely work that's ongoing and what we would like to see happen, certainly for Russell and I, across. But what we'd like to do is, rather than have our own ad hoc CCTV implemented in Kirklees that then doesn't align with all the West Yorkshire authorities, we are being encouraged by the Department for Transport to work together regionally and more collaboratively across the region, and that's what we're trying to do.
Before Blitz, right, is there supplementary before Blitz comes in? Blitz is waiting.
When you talk of, I completely understand the idea of working with West Yorkshire. The problem I've got, and it doesn't set right with me, and it's been with other councillors, that is they cherry pick what they want. And there's a number of issues. For example, in terms of the standard of the cars that what they have, the stickers permanent or not, there's a number of issues. When this is one area that we can lead, and it prevents a great number of it takes a number of issues. But the other, when I said cherry pick, for example, one of the questions I asked was the internal testers that we've got, are they DVLA examiners, or are they just, have an advanced driving test they're doing? Because other councils use external, we use internal. See the difference?
If I can answer that one. We do use, as well as Calderdale, we use the council's driver training unit to conduct our driven assessment. They are all qualified driving instructors that they use, so they're not just somebody that can walk in off the street with an advanced driver training certificate under the belt. As part of the harmonisation of policies, we are also looking at whether we accept a certificate from another West Yorkshire authority. So if you've done your driver training in Leeds, your driven assessment in Leeds, and it's done to the same standard, there should be no reason why we cannot accept that, and that is something that we're looking at as part of this harmonisation project. Just going back to your initial point about the information on the website, I agree, our website isn't the most informative. One of the reasons of developing this policy was to make sure that all the information is there available in one document and is easy to find. The issue that you highlighted to the strategic director about the information, it was incorrect on the website. There was a part at the top that said we don't issue renewal letters anymore, and then further down it said check your renewal letter. So that was altered as soon as that was highlighted. That also started a programme of an audit of our website, and we have staff that are working in the back office that are running through every page on our website to make sure that that information is up to date and accurate as present policies stand.
Thank you. Your driver training policy at 2.11 on page 45. You say that it's been developed by reviewing current practices across the individual authorities, and as such most is in place, although inevitably there are differences in approach, delivery, resources and costs. That sounds as if it's, in theory, it's the driver training policy is the same, but in actual fact the way it's delivered, the way it's done, etc. is different in different places. So perhaps you could explain that first, please, for me.
Yes. Each local authority wants to retain how they deliver the training. We in Kirklees want to move from officers conducting that training to an external supplier, so that that gives us the ability then to move it pre-application rather than post-application. Some of the West Yorkshire authorities wanted to keep it post-application, and as managers we accepted that we were never going to get full agreement as to how it was delivered. But what we could agree on was the content. And the headline sections that are in the report, we've agreed those. The next stage of that over the coming months is to look at the content that sits underneath those headlines and come up with a consistent content across the 6 authorities. And it's then down to each individual authority how they deliver that, so whether they do it post-application, pre-application, whether their own officers deliver that, or whether they go to a third-party supplier to deliver that. That's down to each individual authority.
So what you're aiming is that the actual course itself and the tests will be the same across West Yorkshire, so that if we've got taxis operating from other authorities in Kirklees, they will be trained to the same standards, and our drivers will be trained to their same standards. Absolutely, without difference.
There will be certain differences. So, for instance, local knowledge will be different, but the likes of the English language skills, we are looking at ESOL level 3 for that, and that will be across West Yorkshire. So, if we go to an external supplier, they'll be teaching to that level. If somebody has it in-house, they'll teach to that level. We're looking at standardised questions for certain aspects. So, like Sam's already said, if health and safety in Kirklees should be the same as Calderdale and Leeds, and we can have a pool of standard questions across the region.
Are you going to make it so that the questions, etc., can change on a regular basis, so that somebody doesn't already know the answers to questions before they go into tests, that they actually the training is robust continually?
We accept that we're going to have to keep those questions up to date and change them on a regular basis. This project, or these projects, by no means is the end. When they're in completion, is not the end of the licensing managers group. Going forward, we will meet regularly, and where we have to make changes to the training or questions, that will form part of those meetings going forward.
Thank you. And just a few more, just quick questions, really. Your emissions and your locally developed standards, you're saying they'll be checked annually upon renewal. So what follow-up is there? So if somebody says, for instance, on a test, right, okay, you're all right at the minute, but you need to do something in so many months' time, what follow-ups are there on that? The Children's Safeguarding Board, I see, is the lead safeguarding board in this. So what input does the Adults Safeguarding Board have in this process? And at page 63 under medical, it says the council must be satisfied with the driver's IT licences, and I wasn't sure what the IT licences was. Maybe you could clarify. And the GP medicals, what work is being done with the GPs for them to have full information as to what is required as part of that medical process?
The testing of vehicles is done annually currently, so there'll be no change on that. A vehicle is tested and then it's out on the road, as you know, quite a lot, and the mileage is quite high. We are quite fortunate in Kirklees that we have very good links with the road policing unit for West Yorkshire, and we are out with them, I would say, at least once every 2 months, if not more, on roadside checks, stopping taxis and private hire vehicles and doing random inspections at the roadside on that. And if there are any faults, then the relevant actions taken at that time. We also have good links with because we use Vine Street testing station and George Street testing station. We also have good links with the testers there. So if a vehicle is presented for test in a dangerous manner, they've got authority to suspend the licence, and they will pass that on to us where further action can be taken against the vehicle owner if need be. So the vehicle testing, I'm confident that we are doing all that we can. Sam's alluded to earlier, we've gone out to request to fill for some licensing officer posts. That's also so we can do more proactive enforcement, which will increase our visibility on the streets for random inspections. In relation to the medicals and the GPs, we work to a Group 2 medical, which is set by the DVLA, and that's the same medical that coach drivers and HGV drivers do. It's a standard form questionnaire that the DVLA have developed for that. The driver presents that to their own family GP, and we say that because that family GP's got access to their full medical history. If a driver can't go to their family GP for some reason or they're in the process of changing, then we will not accept a medical unless the doctor that's doing that has seen and signed to say that they've seen the full medical history of that driver. We're working close with the Safeguarding Children's Board. They will form part of the consultation. And adults. They will form part of the consultation on this policy.
And it was about the CSE, because you're saying that operators and base staff need to know the law as well as the taxi drivers in respect of CSE and licensing training. And I'm just wanting to know, as part of that training, are people going to be informed of how the reporting, how to report issues that they feel need reporting?
Yes, it will. We'll work with colleagues in our CSE teams and adult safeguarding teams to develop the training side of that and what the content is around that, and that will include how to report, where to report, if they've got concerns.
Okay, a short list. I was intrigued about the age of vehicles being reviewed, because to me, I think condition and emissions makes more sense, and especially with the new hybrid electric vehicles, they've got a much longer shelf life, so I was intrigued about that. I'd like to know, we used to have a problem with vehicles, taxis, minicabs, coming from Lancashire to our authority, and do we have ways of challenging that now, because they weren't of the standard we expected at one point? I don't know if that's still the case. The next thing on my list is around the knowledge, because I'm wondering, as a taxi user, if I'm in a taxi that doesn't know where he's going, he's come over to help a friend out, what can I do as a taxi user? What should I be able to do? Because that's happened to me a few times. And finally, I can see the practical logic in having a 3-year licence compared to a 1 year, but what if there are some concerns about that driver after 2 years? Is there a way of challenging that? So that's the list.
So the issue around out-of-town vehicles hasn't gone away, unfortunately. The government deregulated cross-border hiring, so you tend to see a lot of vehicles that are not licensed by Leeds working in Leeds, a lot not licensed by Sheffield working in Sheffield, and that is a concern nationally, not just for Kirklees and the other West Yorkshire authorities. It is a national concern, and the local government association, the Institute of Licensing, are lobbying heavily to try and get the deregulation looked at again. Locally, we've now got cross-authority authorisation, so a licensing officer in Leeds can inspect all the vehicles if they are in Leeds. The main operator that uses an app-based service has also introduced changes to say that if you're working within Yorkshire, you have to be licensed by a Yorkshire authority. So the trade themselves are recognising that it's a bit of an issue and are taking steps themselves to try and curtail it a bit, although we would rather it go further and see it local. If any passenger has got concerns about a driver's knowledge, then they can report it to us. Part of the introduction of the new training programme that we're doing is that it's modular in nature, so that if we do get complaints of that type, we can, and it's substantiated, we can send a driver on remedial training just for a specific module. So if it is local knowledge, they can just go and do that as a way to improve and upskill themselves. But at the moment, if you come to us with any complaints, we will look at that on an individual basis. The 3-year licence, which Sam has already made mention to, it's the changes in legislation stated it should have been, that's the default. We are looking to, at the moment, we don't issue that many because it ties in with the criminal records check. Some of them have only got 1 year criminal records left on the criminal record check. So that's why we don't currently have a high take-up. We are looking to make it so that people have to sign up. Part of the proposals is that they sign up to the online update service for the DBS, and that will enable us to do random checks, either 12 monthly or 2 yearly, on their status. Yes, so we currently have an age limit for new vehicles coming onto the fleets, and that's set at 6 years. The proposals are that for Euro 5 standard for petrol, that would higher the age limit so that somebody could bring an older vehicle on, and that's because we want to increase the take-up of more, eco-friendly cars. The Euro 6 standard for diesel, that lowers the age limit so that it takes it from 6 years down to 3-4 years, so that only the newer diesels are coming on. And we've done it that way to make it more of an incentive to get more environmentally friendly vehicles. And as I stated, this is only the starting point, so the upper age limit will form part of the wider work with West Yorkshire on vehicle specification. And it's something that the trade have highlighted, that these hybrid vehicles do last a long time. We're asking the trade to upgrade to these vehicles, but they can only be licensed for so many years. So it's something that we will look at as part of the West Yorkshire working on the vehicle spec as to whether we increase the age limit as to which a vehicle can continue to be licensed.
Right, okay, so the consultation starts next week, yeah, this week, and when does it end, and when do you think we'll have some results?
Consultation runs until it's the 18th of January, and we would expect to see the results being collated with the following 2 weeks after that, 2 or 3 weeks after that, and then we'll discuss those results as licensing managers with an aim to getting it back to Licensing and Safety Committee by the end of February, early March.
I think if we just don't know when it's going to the Licensing and Safety Committee, then it allows members to take part in that discussion. Sorry, Colfam.
Sorry, did I just hear 18th? It's going to finish on 18th of January. Why should such a short space? I mean, normally it goes on for about 3-4 months, maybe longer. I mean, that's.
I think the standard time limit is about 12 weeks, but this isn't a statutory, we're not statutorily obliged to consult, it's a common law consultation, so therefore you can decide how many weeks, and it was agreed across West Yorkshire it would run for 8 weeks, but I think that's actually a bit longer than 8 weeks, isn't it? It's maybe into 10 or 11? Yeah, 9 or 10 weeks, all in all. So, and we wanted to, take into account Christmas. So.
But it's a targeted consultation, so all the key partners and that's going to be affected are all going to be, so plenty of time.
Yes.
So that's fine. And yes.
I just wanted to add, I think we will be contacting the drivers, we'll be contacting all our key partners, we're going to various other boards to discuss it. The group that really we want to reach out to, and that's why we were grateful that we could come to you, as I said at the beginning, is the public, and particularly those vulnerable individuals. So if once you've read it in a lot of detail, if you think there's anything that we need to consider, please make it part of the consultation. We'd welcome any of that.
Something I've just thought of. Will you actually be consulting with disabled people? Because I know that can be an issue in terms of disabled people having access to taxis.
Yes, we'll be looking to go out to the disability groups for their views on the policy as well.
Just final off, it'd be ideal for to email this PDF or whichever format to all the elected members, and they can pass it on any groups or organisations that they're...
Yep, already down. Yep.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I don't think it needs to come back to the management committee. I hope you found our inputs and challenges helpful, but I would like you to let the management committee know when it's going to the licensing committee so that they can take part and join in that discussion if they want to. On the stuff around CCTV, I realise that's a bigger issue, and when you have some feedback on that, it'd be nice if you could let us know. That'd be really good. Is that okay? All right. Thank you very much for that. Yep, feel free to make your way. We've just got one other item on this public agenda, and that's our forward plan. It's always tricky trying to juggle these plans because we were looking at the transformation programme. We wanted that to come sooner, but we're not going to have all the information we need to assess it for this meeting. That's why it's not on this agenda. So it's got to come to January, but we hope that's in good time for influencing any budget decisions. So that's coming early. We've got another early start in January because, again, there's a lot to go through. So it's another long meeting. But if you could clear your diaries, that'd be really helpful because we're inviting the co-optees along for a catch-up with them at 1 o'clock on that day as well. I always personally provide nibbles and drinks. Yeah, that's my personal contribution. We don't have a budget for it.
It's a really nice gesture.
Thank you. Yeah, it's my own personal treat because it's not something we have a budget for. Yeah, and you can see if there's anything else. I think that's it. Is there any other questions, queries on the work programme? No, that's great. That's the end of that agenda item. So thank you for your contributions and thank you for those on the webcast that have joined us.